First off, I'd like to thank the Commission for protecting green iguanas in Florida.
The population really has exploded.
Prohibiting has led to protection.
Now when I'm stuck in traffic in Miami, the numbers are exponentially huge when I used to remove them for free.
What we have now is those iguanas that were born in 2021, after we weren't allowed to sell them anymore, are now breeding in the wild.
And the numbers have gone up tremendously since they became prohibited.
So they're only going to flourish even more.
So the 10 to 12,000 I'd remove, they're staying.
The green iguana, a non-native species which has been established in the wild in Florida for around 70 years or so, was added to FWC's prohibited species list in 2021. This resulted in a near complete prohibition of commercial activity with iguanas and other prohibited species, including their capture out of the wild for export out of state. Melissa Tucker, the director of the Division of Habitat and Species Conservation for FWC, recently testified before a House Subcommittee on the subject of non-native species.
What about this idea, and I know it's something that's currently not being done, perhaps making it more of a free market where folks would have the opportunity to come in and sell these to states and other places where it wouldn't be an opportunity for them to be invasive?
So it's a very limited number of people that will have that opportunity because we don't want to increase the business that's around collecting these animals from the wild. The concern there is that you end up with people unintentionally farming the animals, leaving enough out there that they continue to breed, and you have animals that are in the wild continuously to take from the wild.
Representative Buchanan, to answer your question more directly, which Melissa Tucker did not do in that clip, no, FWC has not considered a free market approach to iguanas. In fact, their approach has been a direct assault on all of our businesses dealing with iguanas here in Florida. The capture of wild Florida iguanas for export out of state came to a near complete halt after the 2021 prohibited species rules were passed. Since those rules were passed, USARK Florida and reptile businesses have been asking at nearly every FWC commission meeting for a change to those rules, allowing for the continued capture of live iguanas out of the wild for export out of state. Our businesses in total were exporting over 1 million iguanas per year out of the state. So those were wild Florida iguanas that were captured in the wild, alive, and sent out of state. The primary demand in the pet trade is for baby iguanas, and that's what collectors target. So usually what happens is the baby iguanas hatch out of the nest. Sometimes it could be 50, even 80 babies. They'll hatch out in the late spring or early summer, and they'll congregate in the nearest bush or some cover as whatever they can get to, and the collectors will target them there, and they're pretty easy to catch at that time. They've just come out of the egg. They're not very smart. They're kind of like picking fruit. So the collectors will go and pick every single one they can find.
The concern there is that you end up with people unintentionally farming the animals, leaving enough out there that they continue to breed, and you have animals that are in the wild continuously to take from the wild.
I've never seen a collector leave any. I've never heard of that happening. I'd like to see some evidence of that, but my assumption is that FWC just made that part up. So this time, when the baby iguanas hatch, is the most crucial to the trade. That's when the collectors target and build up the biggest numbers of those iguanas. We're going on 4 years now of those iguanas hatching in the wild. And now those iguanas that hatched in 2021 that were illegal to collect then have now grown up and they're breeding in the wild. So the iguanas that we could have caught and sent out of state are now out there breeding because of FWC's actions. Our businesses in total were exporting at least 1 million iguanas per year out of state.
Again, since 2012, we've worked with partners, removal experts, and private landowners to remove more than 17,500 green iguanas from the wild.
So you heard Melissa Tucker mention that FWC and their partners have killed over 17,000 iguanas since 2012. That's nothing compared to the million or so iguanas that we were exporting per year out of the state. The numbers don't even compare. This free market iguana removal solution is the best control that anybody could provide. So those iguanas that we left in the wild because taking them was prohibited are now breeding, which is exponentially expanding the wild Florida iguana population. And this has been documented by wildlife biologists.
I'm a wildlife biologist. I manage 11,000 acres of land here in South Florida. And we have a lot of tegus and a lot of iguanas. And the numbers have gone up tremendously since they became prohibited. I have the data year after year of these numbers increasing continually, and it's just getting worse.
There is a very small number of permitted individuals who are still allowed to collect and export iguanas for sale out of state. I think it was 14 permitted individuals at last count at the time of that House Subcommittee hearing, so not very many. Now, even for those individuals who are legally allowed to take and export iguanas, there are extreme regulatory hassles. Every iguana captured has to have GPS coordinates recorded. Those have to be reported to FWC in a certain amount of time. FWC places a limit on the number of individual animals that can be collected. If you want to increase that number, you have to contact FWC and get them to allow you to take more. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these collectors are doing this on weekends or time that they're not working. Nobody's getting rich doing this. And you can't get a hold of FWC staff in Tallahassee on a weekend, so there's almost no way to get that daily limit increased. Once those animals are captured, they are required to be shipped out of state almost immediately, which means that the sale and the shipping has to be set up well in advance, even before the collector really knows how many iguanas they're going to have. But not before the iguanas are implanted with microchips. The implantation of microchips is required on all iguanas before them being shipped and sold out of state. Keep in mind that the primary demand in the pet trade is for baby iguanas. Unfortunately, it's just unsafe to implant a baby iguana with a microchip. The babies are so small, and the microchip is just too big, and it can be damaging or even deadly to the baby iguanas. Microchips may cost as much as $5, but the wholesale price of a baby iguana might only be $2 or $3. So it's not even economically feasible to implant baby iguanas with microchips for sale.
But it's not worth selling iguana when it sells only for $2 and the microchip costs $5.
What's the result of this very small number of permitted individuals and this extreme regulatory burden just to ship a baby iguana out of state? Almost none are being actually captured and exported. Speaking of regulatory burdens,
is there any currently regulatory barriers or anything else, that's perhaps causing an issue as it relates to addressing and managing some of these invasive species, such as the python?
I think that's a question we'd probably like to think about. I'm not aware of any in the short term, but we can certainly discuss it as a team and see if there's something that we come up with.
Are there statutes that prevent private citizens from removing any of these animals?
Ms. Tucker, you're recognized.
Thank you. There are not. The only things that a private citizen would need to be aware of is anti-cruelty laws and the need to kill them humanely.
There are great regulatory barriers inhibiting the removal of prohibited reptile species, whether it's pythons or tegus or iguanas. So-called unrestricted take is actually limited to animals that are being killed on site. There is little real incentive for private citizens to kill iguanas. The incentives are for people who just like to kill animals, or for those who kill iguanas for their viewers' entertainment on social media. This killing is often accomplished by very cruel methods, as is evidenced by the hundreds of iguana killing videos which can be viewed on YouTube and other social media. Despite all this bloodlust and killing, none of these supposed control measures are actually having population-level impacts on iguanas or any other prohibited reptile species as far as anyone can tell. The reason we had 1 million+ iguanas being caught and exported out of state per year was because there was an economic incentive. This demand for iguanas is now being filled by imports of iguanas from their native range countries. So how do we fix this? Remove some of this destructive red tape and unleash this economic engine that FWC tried to squash starting in 2021. Allow the collectors, who are very good at capturing wild iguanas alive, to collect them in unlimited numbers and sell those to dealerships who are qualified to sell and export those out of state. Remove this ridiculous microchip implanting requirement, which is not only unsafe for the animals, but also makes it economically infeasible to engage in commerce with them. Rather than wrecking the lives of the iguana collectors and destroying those small businesses which deal in iguanas, which, make no mistake, is what FWC has done since 2021, we should be unleashing this economic engine. Allow the free flow of iguanas from the wild in Florida to supply this demand, which is already there out of state. It's simple economics. It works. Instead of millions of iguanas hatching, growing up, and breeding in the wild, we can have them being collected and sold out of the state to the benefit of Florida citizens and the benefit of Florida's environment. Let it happen. FWC, get out of the way. All that being said, new FWC Executive Director Roger Young and even the FWC commissioners have recently seemed receptive to changes in the way that iguanas are managed in Florida. We believe that Director Young genuinely wants to take the agency in a new direction. Unfortunately, there are still holdovers from the previous regime who seem steadfastly opposed to any changes in these economically damaging and ineffective prohibited species regulations. A new direction certainly would be refreshing, given what our small businesses have been forced to endure for the past few years. Please like this video right now and subscribe to our channel so we can continue to keep you informed on the issues affecting reptiles and reptile keepers. Thank you.